Hello, everybody, and the season is done. We are here for the cool down room chat for the final race of the Formula One season. I am here with Bowser to talk to you about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and we're going to quickly run through qualifying. So, Bowser, do you want to talk us through that right now?
I'd love to, Dave. I'd love to. Okay, so going from back to front. Hello, everyone. By the way, thanks for joining us as always. Yeah, let's start with Logan Sargent in 20th position, so starting right at the back of the grid. A little bit very disappointing for Logan. Not a great start when he's obviously fighting for a seat. When we've got 2 laps they went for, both deleted for going over the lines. So very, very disappointing start there. Then we've got the Alfa Romeos of Zhou and Bottas, 19th and 18th respectively. Magnussen 17th. No massive shocks in those 3, unfortunately for them, based on the rest of the seasons. The big shock, though, in Q1 did come from the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. Obviously, Ferrari desperately fighting for that second in the Constructors' Championship with Mercedes. So a massive blow for Sainz after missing P1. Handing his car over to Robert Schwartzman, I believe it was, followed by a crash in P2, so obviously that potentially could be affecting him there. Moving on to Q2, we've got Ricardo starting at 15th, maybe a little bit disappointed, but AlphaTauri have been up and down all season. Albon 14th, they looked super quick earlier in practice, so a little bit disappointing almost there as well. And Logan did look quick, before they were deleted as well. So a little bit disappointing for Williams there as well, with Albon in 14th. Then you've got Lance Stroll 13th, Ocon in 12th, and then comes the next big shock of Hamilton missing out on Q3, falling down to 11th. And to be fair, it wasn't actually even massively close. He was almost a good nearly 2/10 off Gasly, who nicely leads me on into Q3. So Gasly starting in P10, couldn't get any higher up than that. Perez in 9th, according to this. Although I thought he started 12th. Oh no, that was last race. So Perez in 9th. No, that's right. Hulkenberg is probably one of the bigger shocker in Q3. Hulkenberg starting 8th position there, so great effort from a notably great qualifier as well, so fair play to him. Alonso in 7th, and then Tsunoda having a great session, getting all the way up to 6th, so fair play to him there. Followed by Norris, a little bit disappointed, looked like he could even been gunning for pole there at one point, but just made a mistake on that last lap going into the underneath the hotel section, so a little bit of a shame for Norris, but still a good effort there. Russell really helping Mercedes in that battle for P2 in the Constructors, sticking up in 4th position, so fair play to Russell there. Well out qualified Hamilton, who was obviously arguably, but stats wise, the greatest qualifier of all time, so fair play to him. Piastri doing an amazing job again in position 3 for the start, and then it leads to our sort of a usual front 2, as we've seen over the last few years, but unfortunately Leclerc just missing out, and sort of starting P2 on the front row, and then it was Verstappen who has got pole.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nothing really more to expect than Max Verstappen on the front row of the grid this season. But yeah, cool. Well, let's move on to the race. So we'll start with 20th and work our way up today. I've tried messing it around a few times. I feel like that's the best way of doing this. So we'll start at 20th. So Kevin Magnussen in last place. Not been a great season for him and for Haas at this point. I really hope that Haas have just gone, sorry, we're focusing on next year, because their upgrade came in Austin. It all went very wrong. Then since then they've been running effectively 2 different cars, one with the new upgrade and one with the old. So bit of a season to forget, and I bet you Magnussen's just kind of like, I'm glad it's over and that I have a seat for next year still at this point.
Yeah, it seems to have maybe checked out a little bit, already in holiday mode for him, unfortunately. Hasn't been good for, to be fair, let's be honest, like probably most of the second half of the season.
Almost as soon as it got signed for that second year, basically.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's maybe they're just tracks that don't really suit him as much. Because I mean, if you look at the year before when Haas did come with quite a good start to the season, the year before that when it was Magnussen and Schumacher, you know, he was right up there at the sharp end and looked really like racy as well. You know, like, looked really good. So yeah, whether it's
you say that very good towards the end of the season. No, he's not some of his best tracks, but then last year he got pole at Brazil. So let's not forget that. So I do think it's not quite that, but yeah.
I think it's it kind of highlighted as well that I think especially second half of the season, Hulkenberg has consistently qualified anyway, at least ahead. Hasn't always been able to outrace him after various incidents or for either of them, but no, you can always see in qualifying it's quite a good representation that Hulkenberg seems to have a better consistency with the car over one lap.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll move on to 19th. So finishing 19th was Valtteri Bottas, a few positions down where he qualified from. Again, Alfa Romeo, I think, very much checked out the end of the season. They're looking at, they're changing title sponsor. It's kind of a rebuild phase for them ahead of Audi coming in. I think it's more just kind of, can we keep the ship floating until that Audi investment and engine come in, and hopefully see a big boost kind of on the levels of the old, BMW Sauber days. Very much getting those kind of feelings. Théo Pourchaire winning the F2 championship though, good sign for Sauber. Does that mean Joe could be in his last season, this one we're going into? We'll find out, I think. But I feel like he's not going to be sat on the sidelines for long, Théo Pourchaire. A lot of talk for the last 2 years about him now. So, what are your thoughts on Bottas?
Looking at this result, as just this result alone, I think he was the only one that committed all the way and carried on with the one stop. So
clearly the wrong strategy.
I think Tsunoda bailed out at the end, didn't he? At the one stop, was it?
I can't actually remember off the top of my head.
Either way, I mean, Bottas, he did the one stop, and he looked slow all the way through. Like, obviously, if you can maintain a good pace on the one stop, then fair play trying it. But they, in my opinion, they definitely should have. When he was struggling so much, falling down the pack every single time everyone else pitted, they were just flying past him, and they really should have.
The undercut was showing to be very powerful, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a real shame for Bottas because we know he's a great driver. He is a really good driver, but. And a really good qualifier as well, but it's just again, whether it's that kind of mental thing of, well, I don't have a race winning car, so I can't really get as motivated, being at the sharp end of the grid. So a little bit disappointed for Bottas, I'm afraid, in 19th, but like I said, in an isolated situation compared to obviously who you'd comparing to be his teammate first of all, that he was on that strategy that I think we can all agree wasn't the best one to go for.
Yeah, obviously Bottas not used to being down this end of the grid, having just come from Mercedes kind of thing. It'd be interesting to see if he sticks around after next year. I think his contract's up next year. I don't know. Would Sauber think of putting Pourchaire and Joe as a team? I'm not sure. I think you still want that kind of veteran head there, but again, you just don't know what's going to happen. Like, if Perez leaves Red Bull or Alonso gets fed up with the project at Aston Martin, you don't really know who might end up there.
The Sainz is the rumour that Audi want more than anyone.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like Sainz would be an idiot to leave Ferrari at this point. You're taking a huge punt on the Audi, but we'll get into more about what we think for next season in another video. I shouldn't keep doing that. So, speaking of Sainz, though,
we're teasing
we are. Yes, a little teaser there. But speaking of Sainz, though, he apparently finished in 18th with a DNF, and I heard nothing of this on my F1 TV coverage.
So he was also trying the one stop on that one, just trying to sort of
get safety car, wasn't it?
Well, actually, no, he did. He was always going to do two stops because he went from hards and took the hards on the first stop as well. So, sorry, on the second stint he was on hards as well. So he always needed to change that tyre, and basically they were leaving him out for a safety car. It basically got down to like the last sort of 2 laps. I thought they were gonna sort of chuck a set of softs on, so I know he wouldn't get any points for the fastest lap, but it would take away potentially. Could have taken it away from a Mercedes if they'd been able to get it, or just Max for the fun of it, so him not having it. So, but didn't seem to do that. It looked like he just pitted and then basically they just retired the car basically just before the last lap. So yeah. A weird one for Sainz. I think they completely hampered his strategy, just desperately trying to wait for that safety car that just never came.
Yeah, I mean, you say he hampered his strategy. He hampered his own strategy really by qualifying so poorly in qualifying as well. So let's not put it entirely on Ferrari. I know that Ferrari get a bad rap for strategy calls, but I don't feel like there's much more Ferrari could have done with Sainz. He wasn't showing the pace in the early stint, making up the places to really show that he could re-overtake everyone and get back up there. So I think that probably was their best bet. But yeah, disappointing end to the season for Sainz. Not what he'd have been hoping for sure. Moving on to Zhou. I always pronounce this wrong. It's Guan Yu Zhou, right? That is how you say it correctly.
As far as we know.
Yeah,
Yes.
cool. In 17th, I can't actually remember where he qualified again. Didn't really see anything of him in the race. I think he just kind of plodded along and did his thing. Yeah, ahead of his teammate. Different strategy though, so not really a great deal to compare. I think at this point, again, Sauber have just kind of checked out, looking at next year's car. If anything, they might have been testing some different bits. I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, started 19th, but then, like I said, the two cars that he managed to get past was Bottas on the wrong strategy and Sainz, who didn't finish the last lap. So that kind of tells you everything. He was the last place of the standard strategy runners and finishers. Essentially.
So really, the only person he actually ever took was Kevin Magnussen. And he actually got overtaken himself by the next man, which is Logan Sargent. Bit of an interesting weekend for him. Could have qualified in the top 10. Doesn't look like the Williams would have had the pace to stay up there, though. Dropped back quite significantly in the race. But to start from 20th, make his way up to 16th. Past Bottas on a wrong strategy. Sainz DNF. But he still overtook two cars. So that's not terrible. Not really enough by the sounds of the post-race interviews with James Vowles to secure him that seat yet, though. Interview after the race basically saying, we'll see how it goes over the winter. So that was quite interesting. Like, normally you'd expect it to be we're going to sign him on at this point if they're going to definitely do it. So something's still amiss there at Williams. We'll talk about that more again in a future video. But yeah, overall, not an amazing weekend for him. Not really what he'd again would have been hoping for to end the season, especially with what it looked like was going to be great qualifying.
Yeah, I sort of heard James Vowles sort of talk throughout the race. He's on with the Sky F1 pundits a couple of times, and he said that both cars, in fairness to Logan, both cars were really struggling with the tyre degradation. Looked like slightly more so than some of the others. So that was a bit of a shame for him. Like you say, even if they had both got up into the top 10, I don't think they would have stayed there. But I think at least getting one of those times on the boards that Logan did, he looked really quick in qualifying, Q1. And to get them both deleted, obviously you go for a banker lap and then you obviously go all balls out for it, and to not land either, I mean, if you don't get your banker lap in, then you've got to go with another banker. Like, you just sort of, okay, I know obviously you want to qualify as high as you can, but you've got to get a time on the board. It can make such a difference to your race, and and like I said, over one lap, that car looked really quick. So, and when you're fighting for your seat like that, it's just so frustrating that it must be so frustrating for the Williams team to look at that and say, look, we're quick, and we've still started back of the grid, and for the first time in a long time, they don't deserve to be there. And you hear about all the way up the grid, cars outperforming, or drivers, outperforming their cars. I think this is a great example of where it's gone the other way around, to be completely honest. They've really missed an opportunity there. And I know Albon's done amazingly well all year, so and he's outdrawn and drove that car. But it's like I said, Logan, we've gone up and down over these videos over the sort of the second half of the season. We've been doing this. He was disappointing, and made some silly errors. Started to have a little bit of a peak up, but the last couple of races again, when you're fighting for your seat that hard, it just seems like silly mistakes that's really obviously cause James and the rest of the team to turn around and be like, yeah, we can't turn around right now and say, yeah, we're definitely having him, which is, yeah, puts me in a very vulnerable and difficult position.
Absolutely, yeah, especially with fresh crop of F2 drivers just finishing as well, and some good performances there.
Some quality drivers in there,
yeah.
Especially Frederick Vesti just missing out on the F2 title, but he's in the Mercedes stable of drivers. Obviously, you've got Aston Martin and Williams, who are part of the Mercedes customers. So and Mick Schumacher sat there as a. I know obviously he's got plans to do some endurance racing now, but if Williams decide to pull the trigger, they've got some really good drivers in the wings there. So yeah, I think Logan's put himself in a bit of a sticky situation with that one, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. And again, we'll go into the options that Williams have available to them in a future video. But yeah, I mean, so moving on to 15th, we had Hulkenberg from the Haas. Probably the best they could really realistically expect out of the weekend, to be quite frankly honest. Again, Haas got one lap pace really well for quali, but they just had nothing in race pace at the moment, and they don't really seem to have a clue why. It's a shame. I'd like to see Haas doing better. I do like Günther Steiner. I like the Haas team in general, but yeah, disappointing season as a whole for them. When it was a much lauded season, they were thinking, we've got 2 experienced drivers, we're coming in with a decent car, and then just nothing really happened. And then their much lauded and talked about upgrade just didn't deliver. Much like Aston Martin's upgrade, that didn't work out either. But unfortunately for Haas, they were in a position where they were already at the back of the grid, whereas Aston Martin were at the front, and their upgrade not working, it just meant they became a midfield team really. So yeah, not great for Haas, and Hulkenberg will be looking for better next year, I reckon.
Yeah, like I said, Hulkenberg has actually done really well this season, I think, especially in qualifying trip. We've mentioned it multiple times before. It seems to have the handle over Megson, and like I say, qualifying always gives you a much better start in the race, and just gives you much position to build from, rather than constantly playing catch up all the time. Which you can look at right at the front of the grid to see the difference between Max and Checo. Max always consistent in qualifying, always near the front, if not on pole. And Checo starting 10th, 12th, he does like most races. Even though he's in a dominant car and he can drive through to the front, or second, or about half the time, it always puts you in danger. You've got to make overtakes on track and put your car in risky positions, and you're going to get caught out sometimes, and that's where you can get the massive disparity. So qualifying is super important, especially in that kind of scenario. And yeah, Hulkenberg's done really well. Like I say, not fantastic. I've been disappointed with Haas's ability to develop the car. We've seen them turn up over the winter and sort of bring a semi-good, so promising looking car, and just not really be able to, kind of fall back throughout the season. Obviously, they are making upgrades, but obviously the teams around him are out developing them essentially. And I think that's somewhere that I know they're still the newest team in F1, so it's still probably something that they're trying to build as an overall team, that they're not as established, but they're going to have to get on top of that quick. Otherwise, if they do one of these days rock up with a car that can challenge right at the front, they will have Aston Martin's issue of not being able to develop, and on what could be a really promising season with championship title aspirations turns to another midfield season, which it's all well and good being disappointed now when they're at the back, but when you've got a chance of the title, finishing mid-season, mid-pack is really disappointing, and that's going to hurt more than anything. So yeah, they need to really, that's my point to them to really sort of work on moving forward, because it's really letting them down.
Also could be opening themselves up to a little bit of embarrassment if Andretti do come in and then wipe the floor with them, and they will no longer be the newest team, and that would look really bad. So
yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully we find out more about what's happening with Andretti over the off season as well. So moving on to 14th, we had Alex Albon. And do you know what? A disappointing weekend for him, I'd say. I'm actually more consistently seeing him in the points, normally at the back end of the points this season. So to finish 14th, and they qualified quite well. It's not the best. I think they lost like 5 places on the opening lap or something like that. So, yeah,
right down, yeah.
yeah, really struggling there.
Wide or something, yeah.
So yeah, disappointing race for Albon, but what a season he's had. You know what? I've lost count of the amount of times F1 TV coverage, at least, has said, "I bet Red Bull are kicking themselves that they let him go so quickly." Because yeah, he's showing fantastic pace right now, and you know, if they kept hold of him at Red Bull and he had this level of pace alongside Max, that would be unstoppable right now. I genuinely don't know what they would do. Yeah, no, disappointing end to the season, but as a whole, I think he can hold his head high. He's done brilliant this year. He's made a name for himself, so to speak, and a lot of teams have been looking at him, I feel, for potential replacements, like if Carlos Sainz was to go to Audi. I've heard lots of rumours that Ferrari would look at trying to snap up Alex. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, like I say, we've run out of positive things to say about Alex this season. He's been phenomenal. He's a great character as well. He looks like he's a really sort of good team player and really good to have him around the garage. So yeah, nothing more really to say. Like, yeah, I'll be a bit disappointed with today's result, but I think Williams, amongst some of the others as well, just got caught out by AlphaTauri's pace today. I think kind of caught a few of them out. Otherwise, he would be a little bit higher up, and also, you know, Williams are one of those teams that, you know, they tend to benefit really well when some of the top teams are having issues. And today, I mean, I know obviously you've got Sainz down there, but realistically, you know, no safety cars or anything, and no big crashes or anything up the front. When that happens, you know, realistically, I don't think Williams and Haas's and Alfa Romeo's really stand a chance of getting points in a completely sort of clean race situation, unfortunately. But, you know, like I said, great season, and obviously we'll come into that a bit more in the next video as well. But yeah, interesting to see what he can do next year and see where Williams go with that car. And I'm assuming he's sort of locked in for next year, and there won't be any movements around there. So yeah, interesting to see what he can do.
Absolutely.
And who his teammate will be. That'll be good.
That will also be interesting. Yeah, Williams having stopped development on that car at Canada, let's not forget. So
yes,
let's hope that that's not all wasted time and that they've actually got a decent car for him for next year. Because it would be
finishing 7th in the constructors as well.
Yeah, nice bit of money to go along with that for Williams, which they desperately need. So.
Yeah, so that's a good few jumps from the seasons before, beating AlphaTauri just in the end. Unfortunately, you know, Yuki couldn't quite, which we'll come on to, Yuki couldn't quite get the points needed to overtake Williams. So yeah, relatively, obviously, you know, it's not the Williams of old fighting for titles or anything, but this is a good stepping stone, like you say, good for a team that, yes, it has more money now, but they're still going to benefit massively from the extra money of being a few places further up in the constructors, and hopefully they can build from that and sort of, you know, give people, well, I guess the next step is try to move on to attack sort of the teams like Alpine. You know, they'll be wanting to try and get really involved with next year. You know, McLaren seems to push on, so you got sort of then McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes, and Red Bull after that. So yeah, they'll want to be in that conversation rather than the back off. So yeah, we'll see.
It would be lovely if Williams can give them a car where they can fight for podiums.
For nostalgia as much as anything else, it'd be so great to see it back on there again.
Absolutely. Williams, I feel like, is everyone's second favourite team. So
lucky Brits, that's where they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so moving on to 13th, Pierre Gasly. Alpine, they've had a bit of a weird season, haven't they? It's been a bit upsy-downy. We're going to fire everyone, then not replace them very well. We've got amazing investment coming out of absolutely nowhere. And yeah, hopefully for the sake of Alpine, they've put a bit more effort into next year's car, because this one just not seemed to really giving them what they wanted. Esteban Ocon, don't forget, they did have a good Monaco Grand Prix, but again, it was Monaco, so that kind of tells you all you need to say about the Alpine car in race trim. Gasly very unhappy to be undercut by his teammate, and yeah, just not a great race for Alpine or Gasly, really. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, with Ocon 12th, Gasly 13th, you can kind of kill two birds with one stone here and just do Alpine as a whole. It's yeah, I mean, first of all, they'll be really disappointed not to get any points from this weekend. I completely agree with you what you're saying. Like, it's very, very up and down this season. Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what they seem to be now the celebrity owned team. So I'll be very like I said.
F1's Wrexham.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see, because I don't think that's really going to have an effect until at least sort of halfway through next season. Realistically, having that kind of buzz around them, it just takes a bit of time to get the right. They'll attract personnel with those kind of names attached to the team now. But that'll take time for those people to get in and then also make their impact on the car to actually, bring their own knowledge and make the on-track sort of element of it, more competitive. So yeah, I'll reserve judgment on that side of it, the ownership side, till probably about halfway through probably the summer break next season. But yeah, I mean this car, I found it interesting that they're one of the few teams, because them and AlphaTauri were the main ones that I could think of at the start of the season, who started with that sort of, if you look straight on at the cars, they had the highest of the noses. There's different sort of wing concepts with the noses. Like, you had Red Bull that kind of stopped at the second flap across the top. You've got people like Mercedes and sort of AlphaTauri in the second half of the season after developments, who had the nose going all the way down to the very bottom end of the front wing. But yeah, and they seem to sort of stoop down as low as possible, which you'd normally think is the way to go. But they seem to sort of stuck with this concept of having a really high wing, which in theory would let more air come underneath and go through the downforce, into the Venturi tunnels, to do the blow, the ground effect. But whether other teams moving away from that concept maybe suggests that yes, okay, like in theory it works with the Venturi tunnels, but obviously some of the other teams have found that the development sort of arc that they can have kind of is limited, and which is why they've moved away to a more sort of developable concept. So I found that always interesting that they're stuck with that, and I'll be very interested to see what they turn up in when they release the car in testing in sort of March sort of time, and February, March. So
it'll be February, mate. If you wait until March, I think is March 2nd is race day for the first race of the season. So
yeah, there you go. So it'll be February testing, really.
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting to see what they come up with over the winter. I would just want to see from next year. I think they had that sort of some really good results the year before, and this season they just haven't been able to build on that, and that's been what's really disappointing. And like you say, just some really weird decisions going on throughout sort of the upper sort of management side of it. So quite unstable, inconsistent, which that will filter right down through the team as well. So yeah, we'll see what happens. And yeah, interesting, but yeah, for this race, I'd say it's a pretty disappointing day. Yeah, Gasly seemed very frustrated. Ocon, credit to him, like George Russell, suffering for the last couple of weeks with illness. So to finish ahead of his teammate, fair play when you're not feeling 100%. But so yeah, sort of almost like good effort. But yeah, I think the takeaway will be disappointed not to get any points, and a bit of a nothing end to the season. So I'll be hoping for more next year.
Yeah, and I'm sure Alpine and Ryan Reynolds and his consortium will agree with you there to hope for more from next year. Moving on to 11th place, my boy Daniel Ricciardo. Up on where he qualified, which is good, but I feel like he'd have been hoping to get into the points there. AlphaTauri definitely would have been. They'd have been hoping for him to get up there with Tsunoda and try and nick that 7th place off of Williams. Not quite happening today. I don't feel like 11th is bad though, but the qualifying was not great compared to his teammate. Yeah, bit of a shocker for Dan, which is probably something he's going to take away. And he told F1 TV he's basically going to take a week or two over Christmas, and the rest of the time he's going to be in the gym getting fit whilst everyone else is having a holiday. So he seems to be up for the challenge. He's definitely a much happier, smiley Daniel than we knew when he was at McLaren. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a next season shootout effectively between those two to see who can try and put himself in a position to steal Perez's seat if he continues to not perform. Yeah, I think it's going to be good overall for the season as a whole. Obviously, he hasn't actually had that many races in the end because he came back, had that crash when he was avoiding hitting Piastri. Then he was out for a few races. He came back. I think Brazil, he was unlucky to be hit by that tyre. I think he was definitely showing the pace there to have gotten solid points for the team.
And
I think
should have been let back onto the lead lap.
Yeah, I mean, it was ridiculous that they stopped him. I can't remember who else it was. Was it Piastri? I feel like it was. There was two cars. It was. I feel like it was him and Piastri. Yeah. Both of them very harsh done by the FIA there. I feel like Las Vegas, he didn't quite do as well as he probably would have wanted to do. But it's a new track. He didn't know it as well. So more of a level playing field for everyone. But yeah, I think this race he'll be a bit disappointed, but as a season comeback, like as a whole after his McLaren time, I think he's going to be quite happy with it, and it seems like he's excited about the future. So especially with AlphaTauri taking on some Red Bull parts next year, obviously development seems to be working towards the end of the season. So how much of that they can kind of keep the momentum of and keep progressing. Hopefully next year we might see a bit more of a competitive AlphaTauri fighting for those points on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I think they'll. With those, like I said, with that extra Red Bull impetus going into that team and their little rebrand as well that they're going to do, I think that's what I'm worried about when we're talking about Alpine just a moment ago. That's what I'm worried about, that Alpine getting jumped by AlphaTauri and Williams to an extent as well. AlphaTauri going to. I think over the winter they're going to do some serious development and build on those Red Bull parts, which are so dominant this season. So that's a pretty good platform for anyone to have that. I think with Daniel this race, if it wasn't for Yuki doing so amazingly well, and I think you've got to give credit there, it's Yuki doing an amazingly well, which we'll come on to.
Oh yeah, definitely going to talk about Yuki in a second. Yeah.
With him doing so well, it makes Daniel probably in a situation that would probably be disappointed with 11th, but actually if you look at the season as a whole, that's a very solid drive up from 15th. Like I said, we've already covered in this video alone how important qualifying is, just to kind of give you that head start. But I think in the grand scheme of things, yes, he'll be disappointed compared to his teammate, but actually as a 11th been a good result throughout the season for AlphaTauri. Bear in mind where they've been. So,
absolutely,
absolutely. And coming in mid-season, then getting the injury, and Liam Lawson looking so good. So, like I said, I'm very interested to see what he can do next year, and fingers crossed.
And let's not forget as well, when you say about 11th place, that's basically where Yuki finished for the first half of the season. So,
like I said, it's based on their other results, that's a perfectly solid weekend.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, and like I said, that's a race without any safety cars, without any sort of not assistance, because obviously everyone can potentially benefit from the safety car, but that's when some of the order gets mixed around, when some benefit depending on what strategy you are when it comes out. So nobody's benefited from that. So that is purely race pace that he's managed to get that back up from 15th to 11th. So fair play to him.
Yeah, and a big thank you to F1 TV for actually showing some of his overtakes for once this weekend. Let's move on to the top 10 then, and Lance Stroll. Actually getting some points. I know he's got points this season, but it's nice to actually see him, finish the season doing it. He had a bit of a wobble there in the middle, especially in the middle to end half, where he just was barely getting out of Q1. Nice to see him get some points. He'd have been hoping for a bit more. I think Aston Martin, would have been expecting him probably to be ahead of Tsunoda, but Tsunoda's had obviously a great weekend, and as I said, we'll move on to talking about him in a moment. But good points. Good to get points at the end of the year for Stroll. Hopefully, over the winter he can build on this, and Aston Martin hopefully work out what on earth went wrong with their upgrades, and come back fighting next year.
It's difficult because it's a perfectly fine result for Stroll, but with the Aston Martin's sort of quick end of the season upturn in form. I think they'll be a little bit disappointed with only 1 point. Like I say, he's been hampering himself all season with his qualifying results and their lack of consistency and development as well. So, yeah, a bit of a 1 point, fair play. Beating Daniel Ricciardo out and all the others, and especially the Williams as well. But yeah, I don't think he'll be massively impressed by that, and I'm going to be looking for more from Stroll next season. Otherwise, I think he could be in trouble, especially with Lawrence Stroll selling a chunk of his stake in the team as well. So maybe not having as much of a say in Stroll's seat being quite so safe. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to Lewis Hamilton, who I think is going to be very disappointed with a 9th place finish on the last race of the season. Definitely looked like he had Yuki Tsunoda on that last lap, but just had a bit of a tank snapper, it looked like. Just had to correct the wheel, and that was enough for Yuki just to get back past him. Not a great race for Lewis. A bit of a messy one. Went into the back of Gasly at one point. And he seemed to think it was Gasly's fault, which baffled me because you're the driver behind. You shouldn't be going into the back of someone. So, also complaining about Alonso brake checking him. I do think it was a bit naughty of Alonso to try and brake before the DRS line, but it's not something we haven't seen in other seasons. And he was well over to the edge of the track, so it's kind of almost like he'd made a mistake to be out that way. So Lewis really probably shouldn't have been right tucked up behind him at that point. But it's a bit of frustration, but sounded like Toto constantly having to come on the radio and tell him, you're the fastest car on track. I don't necessarily think that was true when he did that, but obviously clear that Lewis was not mentally in the right place, I think, for this race. A bit unhappy with his quali, maybe, being outside the top 10. And just on the back foot a little bit. I think he would have been hoping to finish, though, higher up, especially considering how his teammate finished on the podium. So.
Yeah, as you know, I'm a big Lewis fan. I have been most of my life, to be fair, and all of Lewis's career. And from a Lewis fan, very disappointing weekend all round for Lewis. It's just, I don't know whether he's sort of, I know his whole mantra is, still our eyes, never give up, all that kind of stuff, and he's shown that throughout the years. We know he doesn't give up, and he still was trying towards the end. Obviously, you saw that last lap with Yuki trying to get that, but it just, what I saw from that moment there was, he had the DRS, he was well alongside Yuki before the braking zone, and he outbroke himself and got into the dirty part of the track, and Yuki kind of could just slide back up the inside, and that's not a mistake you'd normally see from a 7-time world champion. I was very surprised. I kind of almost looked away because I was like, oh, job done. He's managed to get it, and I think the tone of this chat would be slightly different right now. But it's just little mistakes like that, getting caught out of the back of Gasly, and which I agree with you, wasn't Gasly's fault. Gasly locked up. Gasly made a mistake, but you're still the driver behind, and his front wing went into the diffuser of Gasly. So there is it's not like they were side by side and Gasly had to turn back on and cut him off. He just simply drove into the back of him and tried to continue the corner. Obviously, got caught out a bit by Gasly being slow in the corner, on the apex. Granted,
Alpine reporting that damaged Gasly's car as well.
Part of the reason. Yeah. So, it's very, very disappointing. And I hope that moving into the winter, this will be Lewis's. He'll look back at this and think, I need to do better, and it will spur him on, rather than the opposite of his career starting to wind down. Obviously, he seems to be pretty confident that he can go for 1, 2, 3, 4 more seasons. Looking at where Alonso is in his career and his sort of age, so he hasn't said anything about him wanting to retire yet. So I'd like to think he can use it to kind of spur himself back on for the start next season, and hopefully Mercedes can give him a better car to sort of race at the front. But this was a weekend to forget for Lewis. This was a real bad one from start to finish, really, all the way from qualifying, and Just disappointing. But especially when they're in such a fight, Lewis is normally always up for that fight when it comes to something, and they were fighting for P2 in the constructors. I think he's been absolutely bailed out by George this weekend. George has absolutely saved his ass, and I think Lewis would be having even more disappointment in him if it cost them P2. And there's every chance. Science should have really been up there as well, and if Science hadn't had his issues, would be Ferrari would be P2 right now, and that's like 10 million or so gone,
exactly,
if not more. So I think Lewis has been let off the hook this weekend. Don't get me wrong, he's third in the championship, fighting that Red Bull for second. He's obviously had a good season and consistent season, fair play. But this weekend, bit of a shocker. So.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the man who beat him home, Yuki Tsunoda. Now, if I came into this race weekend, if you turned around to me and gone, "You're going to be voting for Yuki Tsunoda for Driver of the Day," I'd have been calling you crazy. But I did, and he thoroughly deserved it. What a qualifying, and what a race. I know he didn't finish where AlphaTauri needed them to finish, but I think he kept that car ahead of where it should have been for so long. He led the Grand Prix, only the second Japanese driver in history to do so, after I think it's Sato.
Sato.
Yeah, I mean, what a weekend for Yuki Tsunoda, and he is going to be finishing the season on a real high. And do you know what? This has been his best season in Formula One, I think, for sure. And hopefully he keeps up this momentum, and next year we have a nice little inter-team battle between him and Daniel. I'm up for it. It's looking good, and let's see more of this Yuki. It's do you know what I've noticed less of this season? There's lots of swearing, shouting, and all that stuff that showed he was a bit of a hothead. It seems like he's just kind of calmed. He's mellowed a bit. He's getting less of those mistakes coming through. He's doing less crazy things. Apart from there's a few races ago where he did. That was in Mexico where he did a bit of a crazy move. But other than that, it's been a much more calm, chilled season, which reminds me of someone from our e-racing league as well.
Brilliant weekend. Polar opposite to what we've just said about Lewis. Tsunoda, he's had an up and down season, but I think, like you say, definitely by far looked far more of the sort of the person that clearly Red Bull have been seeing in him, and had a great weekend, a fantastic qualifying. Yes, he finished 2 places lower, but nobody expected that car to stay in 6th, especially with a weekend again with no safety cars or any crashes or anything. So obviously, like I said, that last lap keeping Hamilton behind him, amazing job, fair play, and very interesting to see what happens next season, and if he can really push on and fight for that second Red Bull seat, because I would be very interested to see his sort of. I mean, I still think he's quite fiery as a driver goes. Like I say, definitely more of a measured approach to the season, but still definitely got the fire there. So I'd be interested to see if he can force his way up into the main Red Bull team. Him and Max, who are both very fiery personalities, with both race-winning cars. That would be very interesting to watch.
It'll also be interesting to see what happens with him next year of no longer having Franz Tost there, because obviously he moved closer to the factory because Franz wanted to keep kind of more of a closer eye on him and stuff and kind of coach him a bit. So with Franz now leaving the team, will he revert back or is he going to keep it going forward? It'll be interesting to see what happens with that in regards to Yuki as well. But let's move on to 7th place and car number 14, Fernando Alonso, your other favourite. 7th place, complaining, and I had flashbacks here to the McLaren days of an engine with not enough power on the straights. So Aston Martin clearly having issues because it's not the engine's fault because the Mercedes finished 3rd. So something has gone awry in that team since the mid-season, and Fernando is not happy about it. And we know that when Fernando is not happy about something, he makes it very well known. Hopefully Aston Martin can resolve it, because I would like to see next season Fernando fighting for podiums again. But 7th place I think is probably where they probably could have got to in this. I don't really see them being ahead of the other cars that were ahead of them, like the McLaren. I think Red Bulls, McLarens, and the Ferraris definitely would all be ahead, and the Mercs as well. So yeah, actually, I think seventh is pretty damn good for an Aston Martin at the moment. I think they're probably the fifth best car on the grid. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit happy with that, but disappointed that the season has tailed off in the way it has.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, compared to what the results were at the start of the season, will be disappointing. But, he's a fighter, kept on going, and yeah, I think seventh place in the car that they have now is probably one of the, again, in a clean, complete, straight race from start to finish, probably as good as he could have hoped for. And I can't see him being of any. Looking at the cars ahead of him, he's beaten Hamilton, he's beaten Sainz, but I can't see him any of the other cars ahead of him. He would have beaten on a normal day either. So yeah, I think he's got the best out of it for that weekend. Stroll finishing 10th kind of proves that he's that's a fairly good result for him. I think straight line speed wise, just a setup thing as much as anything else. Obviously, we know the Mercedes engine isn't the most powerful necessarily in a straight line, but its drivability and stuff is okay and it's fine. And yeah, clearly it's had a bit too much downforce on there, I think, was the major issue in that one. And yeah, I hope he can bring himself back around to go for the fight again next year. As a whole, I'm very not disappointed. I'm quite concerned for Aston Martin. Has Lawrence Stroll seen that they haven't really developed much and is going to struggle over the winter and not be there next year? And also the big update that they had towards the second half of the season really didn't work. Drastically didn't work. And if that's the development sort of, that's the kind of direction they were going with development, and they've had to start again towards this very sort of end of this season, puts them, from what we can imagine and what we've heard from the other teams, puts them well behind a lot of the other teams like Williams and who have stopped at Canada, and I'm sure AlphaTauri are looking forward to them as their Red Bull parts and all that stuff. So yeah, it's those sorts of teams, and I worry for Aston Martin.
Yeah,
for next season that's my major concern. But I think for this race alone, obviously we'll talk about that more later. But yeah, for this race, I think that's probably the best Alonso could have hoped for, really, and got the best out of it.
Got him fourth in the Drivers' Championship as well. Let's not forget, which I think F1 TV actually told me it was like the best he'd done in 20 years, which is not true. I think it's the best he'd done in 10 years, and they just said it wrong. But I think 2013 probably the last time he was up there. That end of the grid in the end of the year kind of Drivers' Championship, but fantastic for him. Best Drivers' Championship he's had in a long time. So hopefully,
at the age of 42,
yeah, exactly, beating
that's
off
really
quite a few big up and coming names as well. So brilliant for him in regards to that side of things. But yeah, hopefully next year Aston Martin aren't at the back of the grid, because Fernando I don't see sticking around if that's the case. He's here at the end of the day to win and fight for championships. And let's hope that Aston Martin can give him a car next year, which is a bit more competitive to do that. But moving on to 6th place, Oscar Piastri, and then 5th place, Lando Norris, McLaren, having a relatively what we kind of expect weekend. I think they will be disappointed not to be higher. I think Norris probably was hoping for a top 3 finish here. I personally thought he was going to get into the podium positions. I think I predicted him to be 2nd and Leclerc 3rd, I think I remember from our video last week. But yeah, I think McLaren, it's a bit of an average week for them now. We're kind of expecting podium positions every week from them, which when you look back at the beginning of the year and you think where they are now, a bit crazy. But also when you look back at the beginning of the year, they were fighting with AlphaTauri, and there was a bit of a fight with AlphaTauri again towards the end of the year. So that just shows how much AlphaTauri have improved as well, coming towards the end of the season. And it could be an interesting one next year if these teams are able to continue this rate of development. Whether or not Red Bull are going to be miles ahead again, because again, I think they shut off at the midpoint of the season their development on this car. which is crazy when you think about it. They stopped development that early and they still dominated the second half of the season. So if they've built even further ahead on that car, we could be in for a disastrous season next year. Let's hope not. But yeah, so some great improvements from a lot of the teams. I think, though, overall McLaren being a little bit disappointed, but yeah, I don't think there's much to really talk about in regards to Piastri and Norris's races. Really, there's nothing that exciting that I remember. So a bit of a just not quite where we'd expect them to be.
No, it's kind of a bit of a bring it home job for both of them. Obviously, Piastri started slightly higher up, but I think Norris had the better race pace. It kind of proved that throughout, and they swapped him around quite early on, to be honest, in the race, which was a little bit surprising, but at the same time, obviously, I think was the best call to make, so fair play to him on that one. I think Norris, if he'd been on the front row where he looked like he was going to be until that mistake at the end of qualifying, it could have been a very different scenario. He could have, like I say, I don't think he would have kept first if he'd managed to sort of pit Verstappen or even get him into turn one, but I think he certainly could have fought for P2 and 3 like he has been for the last sort of 3 or 4 months now. So yeah, a bit disappointing on Norris's side. Obviously, I'm not disappointed as a whole with him. I think he'll just be a little bit disappointed that it was a bit of a missed opportunity, but I still thought it was a great effort by both of them. I said I've been super impressed all season with Oscar Piastri for a rookie coming in, but it's not just a rookie coming in, it was a rookie who was sat on the sidelines last year. We saw it with Ocon, we've seen it with others. It takes sometimes, when you're not in a competitive race scenario for a whole year, you do lose some racecraft. You do kind of have, you don't have the confidence to break that half a metre later. And it's, I think it even took Daniel a few sort of races to kind of get back used to it. And he admitted that himself, it was a little bit rusty to start with. So, I think Oscar's been a revelation this season, which proves why they fought so hard against Alpine to get him. I think he looks very exciting for the future. I think people have used a little bit that's too much this year of, it's a new track to him, he hasn't raced this one before, but I think that's been a bit overused. I think he's had better weekends and not so good weekends, but at the end of the day, I think as a whole, as a rookie, he's had a fantastic season. Brought some really important points back for McLaren as well, which has been very important with them climbing up the constructors title sort of rankings and getting them obviously a very, very nice haul of points second half of the season. So super impressed with Oscar.
Very good season. Competitive to Lando as well. Qualifying wise, he's out qualified him a few times, and his race pace isn't quite on Lando's level, I don't think, which is why Lando's ahead of him so much. But you compare him to the other rookies that we had this year, Nick De Vries and Logan Sargent, he just kind of blew them out the water, hasn't he? He's shown what a rookie can do, which probably puts extra pressure on the other two more than that. I mean, Nick didn't make the cut in the end, but Oscar absolutely smashing it this season for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So and then like I said, Norris consistency. I think Norris is possibly one of the most underrated drivers around. I think, honestly, if McLaren had a slightly more competitive car, I think we'd see Norris really taking it. And I think he'd be one of the few drivers who could take it to Max and really cause him some issues. I think his racecraft's brilliant. His strategy calls are right up there as well, and he drives for the team. I think he's actually, I know he's very highly rated, which is even more impressive why I'm calling him underrated. And I'm very excited to see what happens next season, if they can, like you say, build on their development arc and give them an even more competitive car right from the start of the season, which is what they'll be hoping for sure. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I really hope that we get a good car from Ferrari and McLaren, because I can see a Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris championship battle being tasty. But we'll see. On to P4 and Sergio Perez. Terrible qualifying again. That car should never be going out in Q2. To come 12th as well behind a Merc is...
He was 9th. It
Oh,
was
was he ninth? Sorry, sorry, we got a bit mixed up there. Sorry. I mean, ninth's still not good enough, in my opinion, in that car. I do apologise to Sergio Perez fans out there for getting his qualifying position wrong there. But yeah, so ninth, still not what we would expect. I would expect that to be, top 4 at the least. But great comeback drive. Not as great as I originally thought, because I thought he'd come from 12th to finish 4th. But still, finishing 4th is good. Again, though, I feel like he should be better than that in that car. That Max just absolutely dominated. He's 17 seconds clear of Leclerc at the end in that race, and I feel like, Perez should have done better. Getting the penalty for the collision with Norris. F1 TV, they seem to think that it wasn't a penalty. I don't know. I think I disagree with them on that one. Norris, they were trying to argue that Perez is in front, but then if Perez is in front, how come he's going into the side of Norris? But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that incident.
Yeah, it's probably one of the juiciest bits of the race, in like the slightly controversial element of it, because it's made such a difference to the result. He did actually get back to P2 on the road, but only because Charles Leclerc let him through to try and beat George. But it had a really important, that penalty had a really made the difference with the Mercedes Ferrari battle, and George staying within that 5 seconds gave Mercedes that P2 in the championship. So yeah, I thought the penalty was. I'm glad it was, as a Mercedes fan, I'm glad it went on there. I thought it was harsh. I think he did push Norris. He didn't turn as tightly as he could have done or should have done, and drove into the side of Norris and left him nowhere to go. But Norris was able to hop straight across, as you've told me many times, the Hamilton line from 2021. He managed to do that and keep the position. So to be honest, I think the fact that Norris was able to keep the position, to me, I would have expected that to be enough. Bear in mind also none of them seemed to have lasting damage, because it was kind of more front wheel to front wheel.
Definitely something. There was definitely some carbon fibre came off from one of the cars there, so I'm not sure if Norris maybe did get some damage as a result of it. I think for me, if I remember correctly from looking at the onboard, I think Perez opens the steering towards Norris, and I think that's why he's gotten the penalty. I think if he's kept it in, then he probably wouldn't have, but because it looks like he's then going to open it up, Norris is already coming across at that point, so he's basically gone, I'm going to hit you.
Norris was right up against the edge of the white line, so Norris had to turn in if he was going to make the corner. If Norris had just bailed straight out, he would have had to give the place back. So I think Norris did everything he should have done there, and I agree. I think Perez was overly aggressive. It's funny that we've seen Max do that year on year and never get a penalty, and now suddenly everybody else is.
Well, we'll come to that in a second, because I've got a point about Max that I want to bring up in a bit. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I found that interesting, but I thought the penalty was harsh, and very harsh on Ferrari as well, as a whole. Obviously, Charles being very clever about trying to help, but we'll come on to that in a second as well. But yeah, I agree with you. Perez has been. It's weird that we're talking about a guy who's come P2 in the championship being probably the biggest disappointment of the season. That's very strange to say, but that kind of, from how dominant that car is, for some of the, he's had some amazing races in the sense of driving back through the pack and getting really good points. Yes, of course he has, and that is very impressive, and fair play to him on that, but it only stems from mistakes on a Saturday, that literally comes down to it, of
whether it be laps getting deleted or not getting a lap in on time and things like that, a whole season of them
the day before, that he has to do those monumental drives, and you just don't see that from championship contenders. And you see Max breaking all the records of the amount of wins he's had this season, the amount of laps led and stuff. Part of the reason why you haven't seen Lewis and other people doing that in other seasons is when they've had a dominant car, they've had a more competitive teammate who's taken some of those wins when Max has, or the lead driver's made a little mistake, their teammate's been there to capitalise, or it put more pressure on them, so they've had to take a slightly alternative strategy, or little things like that. And I think it's the fact that obviously I'm not taking anything away from Max. He's had a phenomenal season. He's drove beautifully all year, and he has been brilliant. I think you have to keep in the back of your mind that part of those records being there is because Perez has been so far off his level that he's allowed Max to stroll away with and not have to even really break a sweat to the point where he hasn't been at the edge driving on the limit to make mistakes,
Yeah, it's been a far cry away from the beginning of the championship where we thought we might have a championship fight on here after Perez had a few good results, and then he just seemed to switched off.
That's the real disappointing thing for me. It's not being anywhere near him to make it even half interesting in some of those races to give Max has strolled to some of those 19 victories he's had this season, and at times it's just been laughable how far off the pace everybody else has been, but including his own teammate in the same machinery.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to George Russell, very impressive weekend for him. He's been largely absent this season in comparison to last year, where he had his best points haul, he beat Lewis and things like that. This year he's been massively off of what he did last year. I know the car concept changed, probably suits Lewis a bit more now, which might be why, but you know what, this weekend qualified pretty well, and then get third place. I can't think you can ask really much more of him. Secured Mercedes second place in the championship basically single-handedly. Cracking weekend from Russell. Again, momentum hopefully he can take into the winter break and come back fighting strong next year if Mercedes can give them a car to do something with.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of George, as you know, as well, and I on his own words after the race, he said it's been his most disappointing sort of results-based sort of season that he's had, and he's openly admitted to making some horrific mistakes along that. I mean, comes to mind the Singapore result, of on that last lap. I think he'll be disappointed on the season as a whole, but a cracking weekend. He looked so quick, even maybe a little bit disappointed because he was so quick in practice, but obviously you just can't really read too much into practice, and that's proved it again this weekend. But I think bear in mind also this weekend George hasn't been feeling well. For the last couple of weekends George has been really sort of ill, and you saw him coughing at the end in the cool down room and sort of on the podium as well. So cracking job to, like you say, pretty much single-handedly bring home P2 in the constructors. Amazing job from George, and hopefully he can push on from next season and have a much better year with a stronger car concept. So I had an interview with Toto just after the race as well on Sky F1, and he seemed to be optimistic about some things in the pipeline for Mercedes over the winter. So I hope that's true. I mean, obviously you're going to have all the other teams who have also got developments and stuff, so you never know until you get there into the first race, really. I mean, even practice doesn't really tell you everything you need to know. So we'll see in the first race this season in Bahrain. But great effort from George the whole weekend. Drove beautifully and got the absolute. Well, I think I actually outdrove that car. I don't think that car was anywhere near as quick as Perez or Leclerc or probably either of the two McLarens. Fair play to George. He looked really quick all weekend, and well deserved break and push on for next season.
Did what you needed to do to keep, I think, Perez a second behind at the end to get third place, and well deserved podium. Moving on to Leclerc. Do you know what? I sat him down to watch this race, and I was like, okay, Max is just going to drive away straight away. And oh my God, was I excited into the first few laps of this race where it looked like Leclerc might just be able to get past him. I think this is where I was saying earlier about when we talk about Max. I think the whole Max being overly aggressive was in Leclerc's mind, and he was thinking, if I try to take this race lead and Max wipes me out, Ferrari are losing P2 in the championship. And so he didn't fully commit as much as he could have into some of those positions. Because in my head at the time I was thinking, just go for it, Charles, just go for it. But then you got to think that the constructors' championship is where the money is, and he obviously was thinking more about that, and so he didn't just chuck it up the inside. Let's face it, Max would have got back past and disappeared on on the hard tyres. I think the medium's a different question. I think that Ferrari had the pace of Max if he could have gotten ahead, but once Max broke free of the DRS, it was going to be a bit of an issue to try and catch back up. Great tactical thinking though towards the end of the Grand Prix. None of that was instigated by Ferrari. That was all Charles's making, very much like Carlos in Singapore. So clearly the Ferrari drivers just deciding to take strategy into their own hands at this point. And yeah, almost worked out. I heard obviously in the cool down room at the end, George and Charles talking, and Charles is like, I was tempted to try and back you off, but then I knew that if I backed you off just too much, then I would lose second to Perez as well. So yeah, it was interesting tactics and stuff, and you know what, it almost worked. A second in the end, absolutely brilliant from Charles. I don't really think there's much more Ferrari could have asked from him. He did everything he could to try and get them that P2 in the Constructors' Championship. Yeah, phenomenal job.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, great race. It is funny. I think it's spot on there with... and you look at those first couple of laps where Leclerc was right on the back of Max. You think if that was the other way around, Max would have absolutely launched it in with like no consequences worried about, and that's the difference. And like you say, whether he's in his head, yes, or I think I agree with you probably more in the sense of, yeah, if he throws it away and has contact, then that's absolutely P2 out the window for the constructors. So, and he did say multiple times throughout the weekend that that's all he cared about. So yeah, I think he went in with a cautious head, but at the same time, if he'd managed to get ahead of Max, and then him and Max could have drove off together into the distance, I think it would have given him a better opportunity to have sort of survived and maybe put more pressure on the Mercedes to do something a bit different, and then that potentially could have caused a bigger mistake from a Mercedes. I think that's a slightly missed opportunity there, but on the
risk v reward, and you've got a Max Verstappen with nothing to lose on the outside here.
Like I said, other way around, Max would have absolutely launched it, even if they were in a massive title battle. That's just who he is, and you come to know that. And yeah, Red Bull know what they've signed up for. It's gonna happen. He's very uncompromising, I think, is one of the best things you could probably say about it. But yeah, measured drive from Leclerc, still got P2 on the race, which I think is, like you say, throughout this entire season, the best anyone else can really hope for is P2 in the race. So fair play to him. Drove lovely, he looked on the back foot right up until Q3, and then suddenly, his first banker lap was 8th in Q3, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, Norris made his mistake and missed out on the front row. George put in was going quick, but Leclerc jumped from 8th to second on the.
He does just seem to have that little bit of magic in qualifying, doesn't he, Clark? He does this all the time, where he's just like, Charles isn't going to get it, and suddenly, boom, he's up there. He's either got pole or he's in the front row, and I think, again, when we're talking about Perez's lack of qualifying pace, put Leclerc in that Red Bull next alongside Max. There's your title fight, right there. I think Leclerc, Norris, and Lewis and Russell, I think, could both possibly do it, but put any of them in a Red Bull or a car performing the same way that the Red Bull is, that's where your title fight is going to be, and they're the elite sort of band of drivers at the moment. I think Carlos on his day can be, but he seems to have more inconsistency throughout the season sometimes. Like, he has really great races and then some others not quite so great. So a bit disappointed for Ferrari. I think they'll be a bit disappointed that they couldn't get more out of the weekend as a whole, but I think Charles did everything he could, so fair play to his P2. Yeah, absolutely. And that just brings us to the man of the hour, Max Verstappen. What more to say? He's done it all season. He smashed it out of the park again. Let's hope it doesn't happen all next season.
Literally, job done. That's conversation over.
It's literally it. Yeah.
No, do you know what? Like, I'm not his greatest fan. Again, I don't really hide it, but yeah, I can't. You can't not comment on what a season he's had. Yes, we talk about. I'm going to do literally the reverse of what I did like 5 minutes ago. But yes, we could talk about Perez not performing up to, but at the same time, and yes, it's easier when you're in a dominant car. You don't have to push yourself. You don't make as many mistakes. But you've actually got to drive all those races and not make those mistakes. You've got to be there in the right place at the right time and pull away at the right time and look after your tyres at the right time. Even in a dominant car, you've got to be there. And you've got to be consistent. And
you've got to step up when other people do. Like Austin, where Ferrari actually did bring a bit of a fight. Well, McLaren brought a bit of a fight at Austin, and then like Las Vegas, where Ferrari showed up a little bit. He was still there and responded to those threats when they came.
And he's just he's been on a different planet this year, and fair play to him and Red Bull. They've done an amazing job, and I hope for the sport that some of the others can sort of catch very quickly up with them. With what I've heard out the rumour mill, that they've got a whole new design concept which is going to be even quicker next year from Adrian Newey. I'm scared.
Well, let's just hope Adrian Newey's made a mistake and he's forgot to carry a 1 somewhere or something like that. And that's not the case, because I really don't want another season where someone's dominated this badly.
To be fair, I think you give all the other teams all winter and they might be able to catch up with where Red Bull are now. Can you imagine Red Bull turning up with a whole new, quicker concept next year?
Yeah.
That's scary.
But let's hope it's one of those things like the Mercedes, where the no side pod thing, where it backfires, and this is where Red Bull show up next season with no side pods and absolutely dominate. Mercedes had it right all along.
This is how it's done.
Okay, let's wrap this up with who your driver of the season is. I'm going to say let's take Max Verstappen out of the equation, because in a slam dunk, he's dominated this year and he would be driver. So let's just remove Max Verstappen. Driver of the season. Driver of the season, I think, has to go to one of two people, and that's either Oscar Piastri or Alex Albon. And I think, just because it's a rookie in his first year, I'm going to give it to Oscar Piastri on my side. He's had a cracking, season coming in. McLaren started the year with an abysmal car, and he didn't let it get to him. Everyone, myself included, was going, "Oh, you joined the wrong team. Shouldn't have got rid of Daniel. This, that, and the next thing." And he's proved me wrong in the second half. McLaren actually bought a car that's competitive. He's been up there. He won a sprint race. If you count those as actual races, he's one of only 2 people doing a race other than Max or Perez all year. I think, well done. Congratulations to Oscar. I'm giving you my driver of the season.
For me, the Bowser _49 driver of the season, mine is between. I'm going to add. I agree with your 2. I think it is between those 2. I'm going to chuck Alonso into that mix as well. What he's done compared to his teammate as well in identical machinery. Granted, I'm not saying Stroll is was the hardest of competitors he's probably had in his career, but again, no offense to Stroll, but Alonso is just fantastic.
I heard a quote during the middle of the race that was someone, I think it was Yuki, was like, he's singing Aston Martin in his video in his back mirror, and he's like, "Why is it Fernando?"
He, for a 42-year-old driving up against some of these kids, he's showing that age is but a number, and it's fantastic for us 30-year-olds to see moving forward into the next stage of our life. So, you know what? I think he's got to be in the equation, and I can't say enough positive stuff about Oscar Piastri as well. I think a fantastic rookie season, and I think he's like I say, he's the only non-Red Bull to cross the line first in a scenario being a sprint race. So amazing job for him. I wish I could give up. For me, I'm going the other direction and saying, well done, Alex Albon, on a fantastic season for Williams, getting them, a team that is, been 10th or, fighting for avoiding that wooden spoon for years and years and years, single-handedly getting that team to 7th in the Constructors and having the only qualifying whitewash of the entire season. And what a turnaround in his career as well, as he's the last person to have a qualifying whitewash was Max Verstappen against Alex Albon.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So as a turnaround in form, and what he's managed to do, and what he's actually been able to achieve for that Williams team this season, I give my driver of the season to Alex Albon.
That is a fair point. I'm actually just wanting to double check one of your statistics there.
One of my statistics.
One of your statistics. I'm just double checking it. Where is it?
Which one are you checking?
Okay, you only got 1 point. Okay. I was just double checking if it was Alex Albon single-handedly or if Logan Sargent had contributed enough for it to have kept them ahead. But no, it was actually single-handedly Alex Albon could have beaten AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, and Haas this season. So, yeah, fair play. I mean, I wasn't trying to take away from Alex Albon. He's had an amazing season. I have all the Alex Albon merch. He's one of my favourite drivers other than Danny. Well, I'd say my 3 favourite drivers are Daniel Ricciardo, Alex Albon, and Charles Leclerc, personally. But yeah, so, I think he's an amazing driver, and I hope Williams can give him a car he deserves next year. And if Sainz leaves, I really hope that Ferrari snap him up, personally.
I think anyone would be lucky to have him, but I think Williams will be desperately trying to keep hold of him as well.
Lock him down.
So yeah, no, I mean, 2 great. I like the way that it's split, because then it kind of both drivers get that accolade for the season, so that's great.
That very coveted accolade.
It's what they've all been fighting for all year.
This is where, if Wibbsy had actually ever shown up for one of these videos, we'd have him make the deciding call. But
well, we don't need to. Do you know what? We can just revel in the fact that both drivers have
exactly. Absolutely, and knowing him, he'd come out with Fernando Alonso, and then we'd have a 3-way tie. So,
we want any 3 ways on this channel. Thank you very much. What I will say is, what we'll do is we'll do another video. Obviously, now the season's over, we will be doing another video
post-season.
Yes, yeah, we'll do a kind of a general. I know we've kind of covered a lot in this video as well, but we'll do a season review, as we will, sort of just picking out some highlights and bits and pieces, and more importantly, a look towards next season. We'll also keep you up to date throughout the off season and the winter with any developments that we hear, whether that be in the driver market, the technology sort of side of things and development, and yeah, so the F1 circus never stops, as they say, and we're very much looking forward to next season. And that will be, as Dave's already covered, is very, very early on in March. It's normally sort
24 race season.
And what, sorry?
24 race season.
24 race season. What a monster.
Looking forward to it.
Which is great. Great for us. It's way more for us to talk about. And more F1 is good.
Yeah. I mean, normally pre-season testing starts just after Valentine's Day, doesn't it? So it's 2 weeks normally just before the beginning of the season. Yeah. So,
my birthday.
Yeah, exactly. So everyone who wants to send them a present, drop us a message and we can give you a location to send it to. But no, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We've got, obviously, post-race, we'll do some talks. We've got all the new car liveries and stuff to come out and things like that. So we'll have plenty more content for you to come. And also, you can always check out our Discord. Join us there. We go live on Twitch every Thursday. Well, hopefully every Thursday, if my work schedule allows it. We will update on the Discord ahead of time to let you know what we'll be doing every week in regards to races on our e-racing league, and keep you up to date with that as well. But yeah, for now, it's been an amazing season. And next year, we hope to do one of these for every single race. And hopefully we'll have a Wibbsy with us too. But for now,